Chapter 11 of A Treatise of Modern Falconry by James Campbell. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Of the way in which a red hawk is to be brought down or raised to proper plight. Care must be taken that your young hawk, which we now call red hawk, be in a middling plight, neither too low nor too high. For in the first case, she is too weak to fly with force, and in the second, will not take the trouble to obey the lure. When she is too low, you must raise her to her strength by high feeding, and when too high, and perhaps too hot, you will give her 5 or 6 small stones over the hand in the following manner. The hawk being on your left hand, you lay your left leg over the right knee, and setting the hawk's train over your left knee, which you do by extending your left hand, whereon she is sitting over the left knee, so that the part just above the wrist may rest on the knee. You are to have your pebbles and water ready by you. The hawk being in this position, you take between the thumb and middle finger of the right hand one of the pebbles, and pressing her beak on both sides with the forefinger and edge of the thumb till she open it. You then put in the stone and push it over immediately with the tip of the forefinger. This way of giving hawks pebbles is said to be over the hand, because you give them with the right hand over the left. But it answers best with an old experienced falconer. The safest way with the young hawk is to cast her. That is, you desire a person to take her in both hands by the shoulders and rest her breast on your knee. Then, while he holds her in that situation, you pull her legs by the jesses and leash so fast as to not strain them under your thigh, by which means she is fixed without any hurt. This done, you take the pebbles one by one out of the water, and, pressing open her beak, make her swallow them. This is no sort of danger to the hawk this way, as she is secured from struggling by the hold which your assistant has of her above, and by the hold which the leash has of her below. But the overhand way may be injurious to her, if the falconer be not very dexterous in it. For when she is averse to the stones, she draws back her head as far as she can to avoid them, and by her violent motions runs much hazard of straining her back. These small stones or pebbles cool her, and at the same time separate from the panel whatever foulness may adhere to that vessel. Immediately after the stones, you are to give her casting, that is, the feathers and bones of small birds, or the pinion of the wing of any of the larger birds, or a hare's foot, beaten soft and washed with water, which must be afterward squeezed out. If the hawk be in good health, she will take the casting out of your hand of her own accord, and you are to give her that not till after the meat is passed out of the gorge into the panel, which generally happens 3 hours after she is fed. If she throws up the casting early in the night, and appear to be hot, which you will know by her eagerness for the bath, you will then give her the stones, which she throws next morning. If she need no stones, that is, if she be cool and properly esteemed, you will delay them till she is in a bad habit of body. It is to be observed that casting is absolutely necessary to preserve a hawk in health, and must therefore be given her always some hours after she is fed, at night, in order to promote digestion. But stones are never necessary but when she is hot, and are then to be given her after the casting. When she throws up the casting, which she does in the form of a ball, squeeze it, and you will learn by the yellow or clear color of the liquid which drops from it, whether she is in ill or good health. By these rules and your own experience, you will be able to keep your hawk high and strong for flight, sharp and eager to wait on in the air. End of Chapter 11. Chapter 12 of A Treatise of Modern Falconry by James Campbell. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Of the proper times of feeding hawks, in order to have them ready for flying at any particular time after. There are great mistakes among falconers with regard to the proper time of the day when a hawk is in order for flying, but these may be easily removed. They arise from not attending to the time she was fed the day before, and may be prevented by carefully attending to that time. If you want your hawk to fly early next morning, you are to feed her moderately this evening, between 3 and 4 o'clock. And about 7, when her food will be gone into the panel, you are to give her casting, which will be thrown between 4 and 5 o'clock of the ensuing morning. If you want her to fly at midday, or the afternoon of the next day, you must feed her proportionably later. Thus you may know when she is in proper trim for flight, by knowing the time when you fed her last the day before. But to know this more exactly, you must also take into consideration whether she was fed the light or heavy food, and calculate accordingly. End of Chapter 12. Chapter 13 of A Treatise of Modern Falconry by James Campbell. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Of the birds the hawk is to fly at and to avoid, when she is in training immediately for game. When you have made your hawk come with speed to the lure, by whistling her up to a place twice or thrice a day, then take a brown chicken, and, while she is flying about, waiting for the lure, throw up the chicken in her sight. The instant she observes the fowl, she will fly to and seize it, and, for her encouragement, you must allow her to feed a gorge of it. By giving her in this manner a chicken 2 or 3 different times before you carry her to the field, she will fly at and kill the first poult you spring for her. Beware of giving her live pigeons, for that will make her check and fly at them ever after, whenever they come in her way. It is certain that, if she kill and feed upon a few of these birds when she is first entered, she will not take the trouble of flying at game, but will leave you in the field and go home to the pigeon house, where you may be always sure of finding her sue-footed. This practice will make her irreclaimable, and therefore you had best take off her jesses, bewits, and bells, as she is entirely useless for the purpose of diversion. And thus stripped, you may whistle her down the wind to prey on fortune. Footnote: Shakespeare, Othello. I never had 2 hawks at chess, which I prevented by never permitting them to kill a single pigeon, even when they flew at heck near a pigeon house. And this I effected by the exact care and attention I paid to their feeding, which never having been neglected, saved them from the temptation to check. Flying at heck, as is to be expected presently, is so convenient and natural that no doubt but every falconer will prefer it where there is no pigeon house at all, or at a considerable distance. Some falconers enter their hawks with live pigeons at the lure, and from their hand, which is so absurd and obstructive in making a hawk, that it ought not be mentioned. A red hawk inclines much to the bass, and moves it once in 2 days. I have already mentioned the tub in which she is to take it. The circumference of it must be wide enough to allow her to bathe with her wings quite open. If it be too narrow, she is in danger of beating her tender feathers on the edge of it, which I have seen happen. When this is the case, the blood or substance flies out of it, and the feather on the top of the pinion of the wing is by this accident lost, as it is in a situation which affords it little moisture. It will scarce ever come again after being once destroyed. End of Chapter 13. Chapter 14 of A Treatise of Modern Falconry by James Campbell. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Of the management of a hawk, when first entered at game, the falcon is now to go to the moors with his hawk, which I suppose is by this time well trained to the lure, and somewhat acquainted with blood, by the live chickens that were thrown her. Let him give her the bath the day before, and also her food and casting in the manner I have already directed, by which he will have her in exact trim for flying. Mark where one of the poults sits down, which you spring when you first enter the moors, and cause your setting dog to set it. Then instantly unhood your hawk, set her face straight towards the dog, spring the bird, let her go off your fist, and she will soon make it her own. When she has brought it down, go gently round her, while she is pluming the feathers off it, all the time hollowing her. Let her break upon the bird, and take the head and neck of it, and then lift her softly on your hand, and hood her as she is feeding. After she has killed 2 or 3 birds, feed her up on the last, for a good reward is great encouragement to a hawk. You are not to make her fly at all fowls. till after she has killed 3 or 4 large poults, that she may not be disappointed by the superior strength and speed of the former, before she has fully acquired her own. A young red falcon or tercel, when in perfection, is the first year very bloody, for with such I have killed more fowls than any year thereafter. Further, if your hawk wait well on at her being first entered, hunt your setting dog, and keep your hawking spaniels in couples. If the bird set by the dog, after being sprung, take to cover, you are to uncouple the spaniels, to retrieve them, as it has already been observed in a former chapter. Great care must be taken to serve your hawk punctually, for many hawks, for want of skillful falconers and good dogs, have been baffled in their expectations, which, had they been kept in blood, and quickly served, would have turned the best of hawks. A young hawk is able to fly 2 days as hard as you please, but every third you must give her weather and bath, and thus proceed during the sporting season. An intermediate or old hawk cannot bear such fatigue, as she generally goes to a great gait. If you chase her, as you do a red hawk, it will bring her from her stately gait. Therefore, you are to fly them seldom in the day as you see them, in order to preserve their high flying, and, at the same time, to carry your sport, fly on with your red hawks, which you cannot hurt if you keep them in blood. End of chapter 14. Chapter 15 of A Treatise of Modern Falconry by James Campbell. This is a LibriVox recording. Of the superiority of the falcon from the eyrie over the haggard falcon. Notwithstanding the high estimation in which haggard falcons are held by some people, there are 2 objections to them, which, properly attended to, will very much diminish their value. First, they are naturally given to check, for when they drive the game into cover, unless the falconer be very nimble to serve them, and be very careful to keep them low and high himself, they rake off with the first pigeons or crows that come in their way. This fault renders them useless. The second objection arises in some measure from the first, for when they happen to be fleet-footed in the evening and cannot be found that night, they are flown away before you come to the field the next morning in search of them, being well acquainted with the country and able to live without human assistance. These objections against haggard falcons, as they are bred wild, arise from the nature of the birds and are unanswerable, but at the same time they show the superior advantage of hawks from the eyrie, which are free from checking, and will stay in the field where you lost them for a day or 2, or, if they know the country, will go home to heck where you used to feed them. End of chapter 15. Chapter 16 of A Treatise of Modern Falconry by James Campbell. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Of flying at heck, let it be observed that the time for flying at heck is not when you fly your hawk at game every 2nd or 3rd day, but when you are resolved to intermit sporting for a week or longer. Immediately after you have entered your hawk at moorfowl, you are to accustom her to fly at heck. The properest place for flying at heck is an old turreted castle, or other large building, where the hawk may have several places of shelter to perch, or in stormy weather. The best spot for the heck is the bottom of a garret window, on which you are to fix a board, projecting 2 feet into the open air. About the middle of this board 2 holes are to be made, through which you are to put the end of a small cord, and then to append to them about 2 pounds weight of lead, to pull them tightly down under the loop made by the cord on the surface of the board, and between the 2 holes put the hawk's meat, where it will be fixed, while she feeds by the weight of the lead hanging below. By this simple contrivance, the hawk is hindered from flying off with her food, which would not only spoil it, but also teach her to carry, which would ruin her, if she learned to do it from the heck. If the house be low, and on that account unfit for a board in the window, nail the board on the top of a pole about 10 feet long, which you will fix erect in the earth, as a heck for the hawk to feed on. The pole must be very strong, and firmly fixed in its place, as it must bear the weight of a ladder which the falconer ascends to put the hawk's meat on the board. but it is to be taken away immediately after, that boys may not disturb her as she feeds. But the garret window is much better for a heck than the pole, because by leaving it open, the hawk goes within and saves herself from bad weather. The red tercel, as he is a tame and manny bird, and neither so strong nor so ravenous as the falcon, is an excellent flyer at heck, and not ready to check. Some falcons, in order to hinder their hawks from checking when they fly at heck, fill both the bells with lead. This is a bad method on two accounts. First, because it accustoms the hawk to fly low and hinders her from rising to a stately gait, and secondly, because it endangers the straining of her back, which, when it happens, destroys her altogether. The falconer must mark the time when the hawk is sharp, which is in the evening, is about 4 or 5 o'clock, and in the morning about 6 or 7, that he may feed her regularly. Her meat must be fresh and warm, for old or cold meat is contrary to her nature, and will ruin her health. This is evident from the haggard, which will never return to feed on the dead pelt of the bird she has killed and taken a gorge of, but must have hot blood for her next meal, by killing another bird. If you cannot always command hot, new killed meat, you must wash the cold meat in lukewarm water in winter, and in cold water in the summer. This food will barely keep her in health, but never in that spirit and vigor which she receives from hot blood. But it is to be observed that, if you feed her long on washing meat, she will fall away, and is only to be recovered by changing her diet into warm, new-killed meat. I must again recommend it to the falconer to feed his hawk very regularly, for if, by his neglect, she finds nothing on the heck on her return from her flight, nor see him ready to feed her, she will check hens, crows, pigeons, or any other bird to appease her hunger. 2 or 3 neglects of this kind will ruin a hawk to her owner, by giving her a propensity to check like the haggard. I used to feed my hawk so regularly at heck that she often sat on the top of the pigeon house among the pigeons without ever meddling with any of them. When the falconer leaves home, he is previously to take down his hawk and set her on a block in the garden under a shade, where in summer she may be sheltered from the heat, in winter from the tempest. Here the dogs will lie and sleep by her, whither also they will come, if they by chance to lose you in a strange place. When the falconer returns, he is to feed his hawk high, and set her to her wings. She will range then for some miles around, and on finding herself sharp set, return to the heck. I have kept hawks at heck the whole year, except cocking time, which continues the month of March and part of April. During this season, you are to take down your hawk from the heck, and to set her on a block in the garden in the daytime, with a tub and water and stones by her, and to put her in the mew at night. Lure her as often as the weather is good, but beware of wild haggards, for they will, in cocking time, decoy your hawks away to the rocks, where they have their several eyries. I once had my tercel thus carried off by a haggard falcon in March, but recovered him on going to the eyrie. End of chapter 16. Chapter 17 of A Treatise of Modern Falconry by James Campbell. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Of the advantages of flying at heck. This way of flying at heck keeps your hawk in continual health and mettle, and as you may feed her as high as you please, you may bring her to fly as hard as any haggard. It is, on these accounts, preferable to the old method of confining them, a method certainly contrary to their natural bent and disposition. It spoils their digestion, engenders diseases, benumbs their joints, and robs them of their spirit and alacrity. By this means, the falconer, instead of deriving pleasure from his hawk, takes up his time in preparing drugs for their recovery. And before that is effectuated, the sporting season may be gone. But hawks that fly at heck are free from all these inconveniences, and not only equal but surpass haggards. For I have seen my hawk flying along with a wild one at the same partridge, and on coming up I always found the former sue-footed, which is a proof she had outstripped her companion in flight. Nay, if you take from the haggard her exercise, her regular feeding, and confine her to a block or mew, she will soon lose her natural speed and strength, and fall far short of a hawk bred to fly at heck. It is observable that the falconers of former times were unacquainted with this way of making hawks, nor had they any occasion for it, as their sport was all chasing, not high flying, which lasted the poulting and partridging season. And, when this was over, they threw their hawks into the mew, till it returned the ensuing year. They carried on their poulting in July with red hawks, and when they could not make them fly hard enough by their confined way of keeping them, they unjustly gave them out as naturally worse than haggards. But the contrary opinion has been already established. The best sport, that of high flying, is at the woodcock, from the beginning of November till the end of March, when the cocking time is mostly over, and about the middle of April, set her to her wings. End of chapter 17. Chapter 18 of A Treatise of Modern Falconry by James Campbell. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Of the proper food for hawks while they fly at heck, and when they fly at game. No flesh is better for a hawk than dog flesh when newly killed. With this food, feed your hawk 2 or 3 months in summer while she is flying at heck. It is easy of digestion, exceeding nutritive, and very efficacious to make the hawk drive her feathers. Give her as much as she pleases, for the violence of her exercise will enable her to digest it, and you will have her driven a month sooner than by any other sort of food whatever. But it is her great exercise which renders it so wholesome, because were she confined to a mew or a block without much flying, it is more probable that it would bring on diseases. As soon as her feathers are driven, you must leave off giving her dog flesh, and in order to prepare her for the moors or partridges, you are to give her stones and plumage and hot meat such as pigeons, small birds, hares, flesh, etc. The strength of a falcon, when in good order, is amazing. One day, when I was in the field, as my falcon was flying above the dogs, which were so busy seeking game, a hare started, which had been wounded before. The hawk, perceiving her, came down, and by 2 strokes on the head, made her tumble over, and at the 3rd, held her fast, she being now quite worn out. To encourage the hawk, I gave her the heart, with a full gorge of the hare, and ever after she flew at hares as at other game, killing them at 2 or 3 strokes, when they were clear of the cover. In this way a hare can hardly escape, especially if the dogs are in with them. End of chapter 18. Chapter 19 of A Treatise of Modern Falconry by James Campbell. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Of birding hawks. Birding is a method of training hawks unknown to the falconers of former times. It is the best way of habituating your hawk to wait, jump on, and to go to a great gait. Nothing in the practice of falconry is more delightful, and at the same time more convenient, than to have your hawk in the sky waiting on you for a mile or 2, till you have hunted all the fields and covers below her with your spaniel. It is highly entertaining to observe the rapid stoops she makes from her height as you spring her game. The falconer and his company mark them with looks and exclamations of admiration and delight. Larks only are proper for birding, on account of the great height to which they fly. To catch them, observe the following contrivance. Go to the field with a hawk on your fist, and carry along with you a boy with a flag net. As soon as you mark a lark, go round and round it, pulling out your hawk, the fear of which will make it lie close. Then order your boy to throw the net over it, and with your assistance, and take it up. In this way you may procure in summer as many larks as you please, but in winter, when they will not sit until you find them, you are to use a bag net. This net is about 18 or 20 fathoms long, and about 2 deep, with a small cord along the bar of it, about 3 or 4 fathoms at each end longer than the net. You are also to provide another cord longer than the net, and to tie to the middle of it, at small distances, 3 or 4 bunches of straw, which falconers call the baffle. These things prepared, you must set out at the dawn, or at the twilight, for at either of these times larks fly not high, but skim along the ground. Observe where a lark sits down among the stubbles. Then 2 men, one at each end, hold the net loose at its length on the ground, and other 2 bear the cord with the baffle long, ever and anon wrapping it against the stubbles, toward those who take care of the net. As soon as they raise the lark by this motion, the bird sleeps along the ground towards the net. When the men at the net, who for the greater readiness must be on their knees, see the lark within 2 or 3 yards of the net, and just about to fly over it, they bang it immediately up, and then let it fall, whereby the bird is taken. Thus I have seen 10 or 12 larks taken, without missing one. You are to catch no more larks than will serve your hawk a single day, 2 being sufficient for 1 hawk in the forenoon, and 2 in the afternoon. For, when they are kept too long, they grow faint, and so cannot fly high enough. When you take them, put them into a bag with small holes to admit fresh air, and hang the bag in a dark place, that by beating they may not weaken themselves. Your larks being ready, take one of them out of the bag, and seal it. Sealing is performed in this manner. Pull out one of the train feathers, strip the plume off one side of it, and then put it through the one under eyelid over the beak, and lastly through the other under eyelid. Thus the plume of the other side of the feather, standing out under the eyes of the bird, hinders it from looking below, and as it can see only above, it will fly upwards, as high as it can reach. Then whistle up your hawk, and when you see your head right in, throw up the sealed lark, which generally she will soon make her prey, and you must suffer her to eat it. But when the lark gets straight up to its height, the hawk, by pursuing it, is also accustomed to go to a high gait. You may seal your lark so as she will have more light, and by that means render it more difficult for the hawk to overtake it. And at other times you may give her an unsealed lark, but if it outfly her, be sure to throw up a sealed one to her, that she may not be disappointed. This done every day before the partridging and cocking season, the hawk will learn to wait well on, and go to a great gait, particularly the tercel, which is naturally a high flyer, and does not carry. He should be trained more than the falcon by birding. End of chapter 19. Chapter 20. A Treatise of Modern Falconry by James Campbell. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Of imping the hawk's feathers when broken. The feathers that are proper to be imped are the 6 large feathers from the top of the wing to the flag feathers. This first feather is called the sisal, the second the longipen, the third the cautel. After the 4th, 5th, and 6th follow the flags, above the turn of the wing to the shoulder. These flags, as they are too small, cannot be imped, and therefore exact care must be taken to preserve them. But the train feathers may be imped, and, to this purpose, you must have by you falcon and tercel wings, and trains, or those of any other hawks you happen to keep. To remedy misfortunes of this sort, when they befall your hawk, you are to be provided with needles of the following shape. Take a bit of iron wire 2 inches in length, and with a file wear it down into a triangular form, sharpened at both ends, and cut through with a very sharp knife the feather which is damaged in the place where you think it strongest, taking all care in the cutting of it, that you will take off none of the plumes on either side from the piece you leave in the wing or train of the hawk. This done, get a corresponding feather, and from it cut off a piece of the exact length of that which you have cut from the damaged feather, taking here the greatest care also, that you cut off none of the plumes on either side of this piece. Next, thrust an inch of the needle into the part of the damaged feather which remains in the bird, and force on the other inch the piece which is to supply the place of that which was damaged, till both meet exactly together. Thus, in each part, there will be just an inch of the needle, and the feather will look as entire, and be as strong as if it had never been broken. The needle must not be too small, for fear the new piece might turn on it, nor too thick, lest it split both parts of the feather. And it must be wetted with salt and water, that it may rust, and so hold both parts the better together. The falconer, if he is not accustomed to imping, will do well to practice it on some useless feathers before he try it on his hawk, lest his want of skill should spoil her. Imping, I know by experience, will restore a hawk to the use of her principal feathers, after being broken, and enable her to fly as well as ever she did before her mischance. There is another way of imping, when the feather is broken at the quill, or a needle is of no service. When this is the case, cut the quill nicely round, and fill it with a wooden pin, which will exactly fill it. But beware not to thrust it so far in as to hurt the hawk, where the feather adheres to her flesh. Then take a corresponding feather, the quill of which is also nicely rounded, and put it on the other end of the pin, pressing it onwards till it meet the quill of the hawk. To fasten them the better, dip the pin, before you join the quills by it, in isinglass glue, and afterwards set your hawk in a dark place till the whole harden and grow firm. This way of imping, however, is less secure than that by the needle. Yet this trouble is worth the taking only when your hawk is remarkably good. Otherwise you will not need keeper to the following year, as you can have red hawks from the eyrie about the end of May. End of chapter 20.